Kiowa is an early career HPC and AI researcher at the Defense Science and Technology Group, DSTG. She is a proud Dutch young woman who lives collaborating with researchers to scale, accelerate, and optimize their AI workflows on research computing systems at the Defense Science and Technology Group. Kiowa is fascinated by data privacy problems and encryption techniques, which has driven her to study a master's in cybersecurity. She is also an outspoken advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this passion shapes the way she interacts with technology and beyond. She really likes cats, which is why she makes cat comics about all of the above. Over to you, Kiowa. We are looking forward to hear you.
Thank you, Saranjit. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm assuming it's probably not afternoon for everybody if we've got Perth attendees, but it's afternoon here in Melbourne, where I'm based. We've just had a mention of my infamous cat comics, but these slides are purposely extremely plain. The reason I've left these slides so plain is because I don't want you getting distracted by cats while I'm speaking, but I do want you getting distracted. If I say something and it sparks an idea in your brain, I want you to sit with that idea and get distracted from what I'm talking about so you can go and start these discussions in later sessions of the Unconference. So that's why my slides are a little bit boring. I'm encouraging you to get distracted while I speak. As mentioned, my name's Kiowa Scott-Hurley. I'm thrilled to be here at the Unconference talking about silos to synergy. This topic has really shaped my career so far as a research software engineer. Though I note I'm neither researcher nor software engineer, I still fit into this community, and I suspect that's true of many people who are here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about my career journey as an RSE. I'm going to talk a little bit about the places where I've seen silos so far and some of the solutions I've seen come up in the places where I've been able to work. Before I jump into that, I want to think about doing an acknowledgement of country. So I encourage everybody in this meeting to reflect on the traditional custodians of the lands that they're on today, to think about the generations of scientists which have looked after the lands that we're gathering on today. But I want to take my acknowledgement off track a little bit. So I'm based in Victoria, Australia, in Melbourne. And I've lived and worked in many places across this state. I'm a proud Dja Dja Wurrung woman, so my traditional land is over here. I don't live over there. I've never lived over there. Like many people like myself, I grew up far away from my country. I went to high school out here on Gunai-Kurnai country, on the lands of the Bryakhalong people. They are wonderful people with a rich tradition across the scientists. They're astronomers. They're interested in the waterways. We've got beautiful wetlands out in Gippsland. If you haven't had a chance to visit, I recommend you do. And it was there that I sort of became interested in the world around me as a bit of a scientist. I moved out of home to go to university in the city, and I moved to live on Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung country, so up around here. I went and studied at Monash University. I did arts and science and majored in philosophy and pure maths. You'll notice there's no programming coming in here yet. There's no software engineering things coming in at all. That came a little bit later. So whilst I was studying, I started working at the CSIRO, the National Science Agency for Australia. I happened to get a bit of a cadetship in their scientific computing area. I'll talk more about that later in this presentation. I now work on Bunwarang Bunurong country for the Defence Science and Technology Group. And as part of this talk about silos, I did a bit of reflection on some of the dreaming stories I've learned about since I've started working in this area. So whenever I start to work or live on a new piece of country, I like to learn about the stories attached to those places. Bunurong people tell a story of the filling of Port Phillip Bay. So they describe a time many, many years ago where the Bunurong people and the groups surrounding them, the other people in the Kulin Nations, lived together peacefully. The Bunurong people followed the laws of their creation deity, Bunjil the Eagle and Wa the Trickster Crow. They describe gathering yam daisies and waiting for eels to grow up before harvesting them. They talk about hunting for kangaroos and emus on what was once land and not water. Their story goes on to tell of a time of chaos where they're no longer following the laws. They're ignoring Bunjil's laws, and they're not harvesting their yam daisies, they're harvesting baby eels, and they're fighting with the groups around them. They're not trading anymore. They're not sharing stories. And everything begins flooding during this time of chaos. Port Phillip Bay starts filling up rapidly. And the image on this slide is actually an image that's been taken from a research paper that confirms that this is something that happened. Port Phillip Bay was not always land. It did actually flood quite rapidly based on some work from fabulous geologists. The people go and talk to Bunjil and they say, please, please stop the flooding. We're running out of places to hunt kangaroos and emus. This is ridiculous. What have we done wrong? And Bunjil says, you guys have been misbehaving. I've had it up to here with you. You need to make friends with everybody and you need to start following the laws again. And I recommend you search this story later and read the telling from Auntie Carolyn Briggs, a Bunurong woman. But she highlights, and I'm going to try read a quote off of my notes here. She highlights that the most important law that Bunjil asked the people to follow was that Bunurong people must always welcome visitors. They must require that visitors are willing to interact and work with them and be welcomed onto their country and obey the laws. And I was reflecting on this story in the context of silos, because you've got these groups of people all based around Melbourne, and you've got this long-standing dreaming story about the importance of sharing and coming together with other groups. And these are the places that I've lived and worked. So this really shapes my identity as a person, is this coming together of different groups, working together, sharing. Back on track a little bit and talk more about silos. So the first time I heard the word silo was when I was 19. I had started my first summer cadetship session at the CSIRO. So I just started to work with research software engineers. I was doing my own research software engineering at the time. I was programming some encryption algorithms. I was trying to get them to run on AI problems. I was trying to use a HPC, a high performance computer, for the same time. And I was working with other people like me who were solving research problems with code. I went to one of the public company meetings. It would have been a lunch and learn or a director presenting something. And I remember after that presentation, there were people in the hallway talking to each other about what a shame it was that there were so many silos at CSIRO, which is horrible because it rhymes. But that was the first time I'd heard that language used. And I remember talking to my boss about it later. I said, I don't really understand what they were talking about. What do they mean by silos? And my boss described that, the CSIRO is a rather large agency. They've got people working in agriculture. They've got people working on 3D printing titanium body parts, and they just don't talk to each other very well. And they're often doing similar science and solving similar problems, but they just don't know about each other. And I thought about this because when I applied for the job, I was assigned a role in scientific computing, which is team sort of central IT within CSIRO. Their job is to support researchers with software. If you need your Python code base updated from 2.7 to 3, we had people doing that work. But we also had Data 6.1 as a separate function in CSIRO. They were externally funded, but they were also solving massive Australian research problems with code. They were doing the same job as the people I was working with in a slightly different context, and we never talked to each other. We're in the same building. They're in the other half of one building. It was like a 500-meter walk from my office to their office. And yet we never did skill sharing. So the CSIRO was the very first place where I learned what a silo was. And I remember thinking it was kind of silly. As I started to do machine learning and I wanted to meet other people doing machine learning, I knew that they were in my company. I knew that they were really good at it. I knew that they had repositories on the intranet that I could look at, but I couldn't get in touch with these people and learn from them. I thought it was ridiculous. Of course, being 19, I could solve all the problems in the world. When I finished studying at the CSIRO, studying and working at the CSIRO, I found a job at the Monash University E-Research Centre on their high-performance computing team. The job I picked up there was about making high-performance computing more accessible for people doing AI. I thought this was fantastic because I'd just struggled to learn how to use a HPC myself for the last however many months I'd been at CSIRO. And I continued to run into these silos and these divisions. I didn't realize HPC and AI weren't compatible 5 years ago. And in fact, many old school high performance computing people just felt like their HPCs were big CPU clusters, and this GPU driven deep learning didn't really fit here, even though we needed the same sets of hardware to solve slightly different problems. I started to notice that there were divisions between enterprise IT and research IT. I started to notice that many of the divisions I was seeing in the academic setting were driven by funding. You'd have two groups doing the same thing, but one of them had a block of funding from somewhere different, and so they couldn't work together. They had to demonstrate different outcomes to their funding partners. And that sort of extended to this division between faculties that I started to see as well. I was really fortunate to be put in a position where it was my job to make HPC more accessible for AI, because I got to see all of these silos and I got to start seeing problems where I could break down barriers. It was my mandate to make this computer more accessible for people who didn't feel it was accessible for them. It was my mandate to link people up and to connect people across different domains. It was my mandate to go talk to people who'd been established on this system in places like biocommons, in our omics communities at Monash University, from our physics departments, and take what they had already learnt from years and years and years of running on HPC systems and go and give that to my machine learning community that was new and forming and growing. And it was really hard. You'd be looking for a benchmark on assessing whether or not your code was actually performant, and it had been written for physics software. And so you'd have to tweak it a little bit, but it was really hard to understand the code to do that tweaking because it assumed that you knew a little bit about computational fluid dynamics. I did not know anything about computational fluid dynamics. I was here to help AI people. Why would I know anything about that? The same thing was true when I was talking to our omics researchers. They're talking about protein folding and DNA sequencing. And I'm going, okay, but how do I use that information that you already got on how to profile code? And how do I give that to my machine learning researchers in their context? How do I learn from you without having to go back to university and do a biology degree? There are many of these problems that I suspect people here are running into in their institutions. But I've also been lucky enough to see synergies. So one of the projects I did get to work on whilst I was at Monash University was around a machine learning hardware platform for people to run on, which was funded by the ARDC. That work has continued since I've left the organisation. But in parallel to building a hardware platform for people to do machine learning, we were also building a platform for people to do cryo electron microscopy, which I know nothing about. I'm not going to pretend to know anything about. What was really interesting was that despite working on two really different domains, we were supporting them with the same sets of hardware, with really similar code bases, with really similar user-focused interfaces to get access to these platforms, with similar sets of documentation. And it's one of the only places where I've been able to work and see how the work that I'm doing to support my community directly translates into work that supports another community to build two parallel platforms. And so here's somewhere where I've been able to see fantastic synergies. I don't see it very often. Didn't want to talk for too long. I want to think about moving forward for the rest of the Unconference here. Where have you seen silos in your workplaces that felt as silly as the division between Data 61 and scientific computing at CSIRO? Are there people that you wish you could be talking to in your organization? You just don't know how to get through to them. Are there people you wish you could be talking to, but they speak physics and you speak biocommons? You speak Galaxy. You're dealing with a Galaxy platform, but they're speaking machine learning and AI like I am, and they're completely insensitive to your concerns about the stars. Think about where you've experienced synergies. It can be really challenging to build communities and to share knowledge across those communities. Have you seen that happening? I know for me, being in the hardware side of things in HPC, it's often a little bit easier to go cross-domain than if I was in the trenches writing domain-specific software. And have a think about the very messy, very non-standard, very chaotic paths you've gone through in your career to get to where you are at this conference. I've talked about a breadth of topics in this very short keynote because my career has been quite messy, and I suspect that's true for others here as well. So on that, I'll wrap my keynote off, and I look forward to hearing discussions throughout the Unconference.
Thank you so much, Kiowa. You really made me reflect on where I come from and the things that I have been through to reach a stage here. I would like to open the floor to anybody who would like to share their experiences around silos, around synergies, what they have experienced, what they have seen, heard. Feel free to share. Or if you have any other questions for Kiowa or the things that she shared.
I just sort of like to, it's Roland here, working with medical research institutes. I can see that there's a lot of silos. Medical research institutes in the past have been able to get by being relatively insular in terms of their compute and their sort of research software engineers. But I think more and more people are starting to realize, along with, you know, even data sharing, that, hey, maybe we need to work together with, say, for example, when ARNet was doing that work around Globus, it's still very, very difficult to transfer data from one medical research institute to another in an appropriate way. And I think that's where we're starting to do things, and even with Biocommons and Nextflow Tower, that's also starting to getting people to think about how do we actually work together a little bit more within medical research institutes.
Thanks for sharing that experience with medical research institutes, Roland. Anybody else wants to share their experiences?
Yeah, a lot of what you said resonated with things I've experienced over the last 10, 15 years. I guess we are, you know, you're providing yet more evidence of the need for coordination, even within an institutional context of you know, skills and experiences and infrastructures and code across different domains and disciplines. And I think, fortunately or unfortunately, enterprise IT, which dominates university landscape overall, still doesn't really appreciate the porous nature of research. Yeah, I guess maybe it's not a question, more just an appreciation of the challenges, and that we need to, you know, I guess enterprise IT is very good at arguing about the benefit of why it should exist, and you know, maybe coming together to figure out how do we argue for this benefit of cross-departmental faculty research computing. You know, what are those arguments for research, and how do we just become stronger at making those arguments is a thing. And I think that's what we still need to work on.
Yeah, and I definitely think being in the AI space is really interesting for that, because it's rare that I'm working with an AI researcher. I'm working with a biologist using AI, or a physicist using AI, or a chemist using AI. And so all these groups are looking for the same sort of compute hardware. They're looking for the same data sets. They're looking for the same research software support. They're looking for really the same buckets of resources, but they're so used to operating separately that it's almost like we don't know how to pull those things together. And that's a great argument to make to enterprise IT. Hey, let's buy one big set of software and one big set of hardware and one big kit of central resources that can support them with their code, because it's more cost effective. It makes it easier for the researchers to find the people or the hardware or whatever it is that they need. And so being in AI at the moment, particularly interesting because it is by its nature cross-domain. You can't avoid it.
Yeah, that's a good observation, and a very, very good socializing kind of bounding concept, right, to make this happen. So, yeah.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Kiowa. On the topic of cross-domain, I would also like to ask if anybody has any experiences in non-academic or non-research environments, industries, say, about how have you experienced silos working in industries, or have you experienced a more synergy in industry? So that's an open question to anybody who wants to comment. Okay, no comments. All right. So I think we'll end this session a bit earlier. The next is a discussion session. I hope you feel inspired from Kiowa's keynote to share some discussion topics in the next session, and we can discuss more in detail in those sessions. It will start in less than 8 minutes from now, and I hope to see you there. Thank you everyone for joining.